Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the T.O.A Podcast. As always, I am your host, Onvermel, and today I'm just joined by one of my dear brothers. That to my left is Zack-ta. Zack-ta, how's it going?
Oh, not bad. It's been a pretty good day, actually.
Yeah, we got some nice cool, refreshing alcoholic drinks.
Cold ones.
Don't worry, we're not drinking on the job because we're not getting paid.
Just a couple of cold ones. That's all you need to know.
That was a cold one. That's actually a really good song that I only heard on the radio yesterday. I haven't heard it in like 2 years, by the way. But with that little side tangent, just going to this for this next few ones. Well, I'm just going to be jumping back and forth between the brothers and see how that's going to work out. Also, with the last podcast, I would just like to say, I had something I wanted to say about
Apology
it.
for the
Possibly the audio might have been not the greatest because it was a bit echoey. I think, and I didn't do much. I was kind of late getting it out. There was like no extra visuals. I don't know if anyone actually cares. If anyone cares about the visuals, let me know with this one. I'm actually kind of would like to gauge if people prefer a lot of visuals about what we're talking about, or if they don't actually look at it and just listen. Let me know in the comments. But with that out of the way, today, I would like to actually talk about the second generation of Bionicle from 2015. Now, the thing about this generation is you and me have rather differing opinions on it.
Vastly different opinions. This is a topic definitely suited for the two of us.
This is why there's actually going to be two of us, because it's actually one of the first times I would say that, at least for us three main, us three T.O.A, that like this one's actually going to have our differing opinions, because usually most of the topics we talk about, we more or less agree. It's more of us just kind of spewing thoughts, but we mostly all agree with the thoughts.
That is true. We, as a family, tend to be pretty like-minded and similar prospects and all that.
Well, specifically for us three as well. If you had some of our other siblings, you might get differing opinions because, different life experience and all that. But I will start this off by saying that I actually think Gen 2 gets a little bit of a bad rap. I'm not saying it is good as Gen 1 by any means, but I think Gen 2 had a lot to offer and has a little bit more substance than I think a lot of people think about, specifically you over there.
Yeah, see, well, I understand, they wanted to try watering it down a little so it wasn't quite so much to take in. I do find that in there's a good story there to be had, but it was so poorly, what's the word I'm looking for? Executed that, it was just a disappointment, and I really find it a little too bland.
See, I don't think it was the story that was the problem. I think the story was fine. Like, what they had was the story. I think more came down was the problem is that they didn't have as much of the story. What they had, like with the T.O.A basically arriving, basically brainwashed onto this new island, not knowing who they are, basically having to kind of discover stuff as they go. I think it was a fine story. My problem is that was like the only story we had. We had it through like every medium basically just told the same story, which I know Gen 1 kind of did the same thing, but they used their different mediums, like the comics, the games, the books. They basically all told slightly different aspects of the same story. And that's one reason why Monog from Gen 1 I think was also so really popular, because you had this T.O.A's journey through the books and comics, and then you have basically an outsider's perspective with the games. Gen 2 didn't necessarily have that. You basically just had the same story with the 6 T.O.A like through the comics, or the graphic novels, I think. Actually, no, the graphic novels I think were different stuff. I don't know. It's actually okay. In fairness, it's been a while since I've reviewed most of this, but I do think the mystery of Gen 2 about who the T.O.A, like where they came from, because like I don't know if this only appealed to old Bionicle fans, because as an old Bionicle fan, I was curious: is this connected to the original? Is this the same T.O.A, 6 T.O.A, in a different time, in a different space, like? That was the thing I was always curious about. Now, for newer fans, I don't know if this was intriguing, and just like the mystery of all of Gen 2, I think, was a really good part. Now, unfortunately, though, because it was cut short, the mystery was also one of the annoying parts, because there's a lot of stuff unanswered, or got wrapped up really quickly, so the mystery was answered in a dumb way, which still led into more mysteries. But I think that the story was actually good, but I think its execution was fine, but I just think there was just could have been more story overall.
I mean, like, the whole thing just feels weakly put together, and like, There are some aspects I like. Like, I do like that this time Makuta actually is, quote-unquote, Matanui's brother.
Or, Akima the namesake for him, basically.
Yeah, but it's representing Matanui from the original. Same concept. Good, bad. Sure, they tone it down to not great spirit, to just simple caretakers, kings and lords, and mask makers and whatnot. And, like, I enjoy the fact, like, I do enjoy the builds in themselves, though the masks are a point of contention that I really dislike on so many levels, being that they aren't compatible with the old heads in any way.
Do you like the look of them?
They are pretty cool, though I always found their eye sockets to look just a little too small, where all the originals and others always had somewhat larger eyes. And
let me say this: those eye sockets could make Don Adams look big.
that man and his beady eyes.
Yeah, a distinct and unique voice, which I can't do.
A distinct and unique voice, which I cannot do.
The grave
either.
of Don Adams is rolling in his grave. Sorry,
Thank goodness he is not around to hear this. And but yeah, it's just I definitely am missing the original Gen 1 stuff, and I think the Netflix series actually brought it down for me, because while the story was decent, I felt it just felt too childish. It just didn't grip me.
I will admit that the Journey to One Netflix series was vastly underwhelming. It definitely made them, because compared to the graphic novels and even the online animations, it came off as everybody being a bit dumber. Because the online animations, a new one's going, oh, don't fight. It wasn't genius writing, but because it was mostly a narrator telling everything, you kind of just felt like, oh, this guy's telling a story, so it doesn't seem like, it feels like more like a dramatization, so it's okay, you can kind of get away with it. But when you have the Netflix show where everybody's, this is the character, this isn't a retelling, this is just them, they did come up with, now there's certain moments in the Netflix series I thought was really, really good. Mostly anything with Pohatu. Pohatu was a great character.
I did like Pohatu, and particularly his disdain for Scalpios.
Yes, when we, especially his disdain for Qatar. Now, we're going to get into, that's going to be, okay, but the thing about Pohatu's relationship with Qatar, I've brought up a few times, but when we talk about Throwbots, we're going to have a discussion about this, because it is actually really funny for us. But the thing about Gen 2 is, there was a lot of actually pretty decent lore and such with it, specifically in the graphic novels and the books. Now, unfortunately, unless you were actively looking for these items, you had no idea they existed. Because I only knew about them mostly through the basically TTV and their podcast, and basically keeping updates with all the Gen 2 stuff. Because I basically looked at everything on the Lego.com site. I don't remember seeing anything about the books and graphic novels. Maybe there was something in the very beginning where there was something about the first book, that's oh, go here to get the book. But they did not advertise the books and graphic novels at all, despite those probably being the best aspect of Gen 2, the part that gave the most substance and actually felt, because I would say whenever it's focused on Akimu and Makuta, I think were actually some of the best stories. The backstory with those two, I think, was actually the best graphic novel. Even the Protectors, there was one that I think was focused on just them, and I actually thought that was really actually good.
I mean, I will be honest, I've never read those expanded. I've only ever seen the show, and what little popped up online and what you've told me.
It was I can count everything on my hand.
Though when I was unpacking some of my stuff, I think I have one of the actual books, which is something I don't think I've ever read.
I will say that the reading quality of the books, I would say, is comparable to the first 3 Gen 1 books. So it's less than Greg Farsi's quality.
First 2, I think Greg.
It's really those first 2,
I think Greg picked it up on the 3rd.
You could definitely tell, this is for a younger reader, which is fine, but it expanded on the lore, which this is the thing great about books and novels and comics and stuff, it expands on the lore. But I mean, Gen 2, you could say even with the animations that they just feel more childish, and the simpler Flash animation. I know they were trying to emulate Monog, but it's Flash animation, the charm. They were trying to go for more for the charm, didn't quite work. But they're like, I would say the best aspect of Gen 2 was the mystery, because in the second way, like year, you basically had the maze. Like the island maze. Like there's like another island out there with a maze. And that concept there made me look forward to the future of Gen 2 so much, because my questions were, why is there, it's like, okay, so there actually are other islands. Because with Matanui, technically, if you think about the surface of Matanui, there more or less was no other islands. Like for the first 3 years, there was Matanui, and that was it. There was nothing. And like, so it was like, okay, nothing else there. But this one is like, there's actually another island out there with a mysterious maze that seems to be like almost alive. And so the idea is like, oh, well, what other? I was hoping that basically as the years went on, they would visit different islands. Like they would expand the whole planet and have a little less of confusing geography than Gen 1.
Okay, see, now you got me interested. I didn't know about this maze thing. And this whole, when you're talking about this maze, I'm getting like Del Toro vibes from this. Well, so I'm just like, I wanted to see more of this maze.
Well, you did see it, like in the Journey to One, that's basically where they go. They cross this basically the expanse of water to get to this maze. But Journey to One, I think we blocked out our memories mostly, so.
Right, I forgot they crossed the big body of water. I think I just assumed. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a different. It never occurred to me that that's a different island.
And the thing is, like, it's not really addressed that there's like another island, but like for Bionicle fans, it's like another island. Now things are getting interesting, and other parts of lore that like randomly came out was like, for the Skull Warriors, you have Skull Slicer, the guy with 4 arms.
That could have been it.
Now he was probably the crappiest of the 4 sets, but arguably has the best. I don't know story because like. Basically, I think his backstory was that he was a warrior of the gladiatorial arena that they basically found him in. And that right there, I'm like, I want to know more about this. Tell me. So like that was already building up like at this point in the story, you already knew that there was like a lot of like history to this island, right? By the time the T.O.A got there, like the city of the mask makers is like it's abandoned. You get there, it's like, well, there's the towers, like what happened here, and then you also notice like there's like a gladiatorial arena, like. It was just building up the mystery of that city that I just really, really wanted to see like more like trinkets. So I'm like, they made this boring scare. Like it was just like a one little paragraph, I think, in a bio in like a magazine, like a European magazine or something. It's like one tiny bit of like line somewhere made him like 10 times cooler.
I do like arenas very much, particularly ones where it's very gladiatorian like. I was going to say though that. It may not be so much a comparison, but one thing that I kind of feel like Gen 2 should have done. I think I don't quite know why they didn't call Akimu Matanui, but I feel like they should have at least called Akimu Artaka. I feel like that would have just made sense.
I feel like, see, calling him Artaka I think would have been a worse idea, because keeping Akimu like as Makuta's brother, you're basically renaming Matanui. But if you gave him Akimu, then you're basically trying to be like, okay, if you called him Artaka, then fans would be like, but why is Artaka Makuta? Right. Now the mask maker thing works for Artaka. Like the character, they basically took the character of Artaka a little bit. Like Artaka and Kurzani's dynamic, a little bit, basically pretty much Artaka and Kurzani had the dynamic Matanui and Makuta that they lost come year 4. And they basically brought that back, but
this is actually their story retold.
So, like, also they're going to keep Makuta, but they probably were like, well, they probably might not give him Matanui the name Matanui, like Akimu Matanui. A little bit had to do probably with maybe the whole controversy with Maori language. So they were probably like, we're just going to leave that one. Like, we're not going to leave
bygones be bygones.
And also because, you went from Matanui, who was like the great spirit. So it's like, let's make a new character. Like, because they only basically kept the 6 T.O.A and Makuta, which, I think that was probably half the reason. Like, no, we're going to keep these names, nothing else.
Because let's be honest, any name they tried to come up with the T.O.A probably would have been like Firebert or something lame like that.
It is hard to say. I like the idea of them reinventing the starting kind of from basics, taking what worked well in 2001. I mean, half the reason why I think Gen 2 kind of fails mostly just most people who have looked at Gen 2 have agreed that the reason why it might have failed its sales is because Lego didn't market it well at all.
Other than Lego.com, the official Lego website, which has like little subsections for every theme, I don't remember Bionicle advertisement anywhere in any form.
Well, it's like, I think they expected the old fans. Well, now you can tell for a fact that they expected the old fans to kind of.
I don't think they expected them to
More
market
like,
just
more
to
like they
buy.
hoped that the old fans were maybe going to basically like share the love a little bit, basically free marketing with them. The problem with that is the fans were like what just turning 20, so you can't even be like, oh, maybe they'll show them to their kids because none of them had kids yet, pretty much. So you weren't going to be getting like you can like now just like let's say something like Star Wars. You don't have to do as much marketing because parents are still showing their kids the original 6 movies. You know, those movies are still have a life because parents show. That's how parents are still showing their kids that.
And let's be honest here. When Bionicle first came out, it was 10 cents a canister.
$10.
$10 a
If
canister.
only it was a dime. Like,
Well, back in our day,
back in my day, it was a dime a T.O.A.
So yeah, the original basic sets were $10, and they eventually went up to $15 when things got a little bigger and prices went up. But and then Hero Factory came out, and it went back to $10, I believe.
Yeah, they went down back to 10ish.
And then we get the new Bionicles, and I think it was like 18 and 25 for different T.O.A. There wasn't like a small set.
I think it was 17 and 25. So like the $17 ones I think was fine because, you know, with inflation and like people a dollar isn't worth as much anymore. So kids are probably just getting more money. Although it's like it maybe is a little reasonable enough, and like the protectors, that. But the fact that you had like the $25 like Tahu Anua, you basically at this point it was no longer feasible to get like all 6 T.O.A. as easy.
I think you had to drop 3 digits for the first time to get them.
Well, see, 25. Well, 75 for like 3 of them. Yeah, no, you'd have to drop over like I think be like 120 to get all 3 or to get all 6.
The most expensive.
I remember that because like when I got because I basically got all the second wave almost in one go, and it was like it wasn't cheap. Let me tell you.
Yeah, because even when the canister sets were 15, that would have been like $90, which is still less than 3 digits.
What I do think, what was a really good idea for the sets was giving them the skull spiders. Now I know, not everybody like them. I think X says he doesn't like the skull spiders at all. But what they did offer was a very cheap, easy way to get like if you have 2 T.O.A, you instantly have like a villain without having to have a whole other figure.
Heck, you can get one set and have a villain. This has definitely been something Lego's changed over a while. There used to be a time like, space sets and the early Bionicles is you got a set and you just have it. But if you wanted conflict, you had to get a second set of a different theme or the villain of that wave. Because, like, we didn't get a villain. The first villain we established in a previous episode was a Robo Rider. After I probably had, like, 4 other Bionicles.
Yeah, it's like actually I'm talking to How One recently off screen, basically. He was mentioning how our family didn't get into Bionicle until like the tail end of 2001, early 2002, so we didn't really get any Rahi off the bat. And actually thinking about it, like, by having the Gen 2 sets with skull spiders and only having really one boss set, you were able to basically, you can kind of almost get away with the T.O.A being more expensive because you aren't trying to buy the villains for them. However, you got all these small little skull spiders you can latch onto people's faces, make everyone a villain, right? That's fine. I do think, though, that the Lord of Skull Spiders should have been the biggest set of the wave, rather than the same price as the small T.O.A.
I was just going to say that. The Lord of Skull Spiders should have been a bigger set.
Pitiful.
Heck, they could have done what they did with the Chemo and made the Lord of Skull Spiders part of, like, say, Tahu, or make them bigger, because, let's be honest, the Lord of Skull Spiders is not... It's a cool-looking spider, because that's what he is, a spider. But he really is boring.
What they should have done was make Kopaka a $17 set. Because he doesn't need to be as big. Because Anua's the big, chunky guy. That's fair. Tahu's the main leader. He's like the big boss leader. So that's kind of fine. But Kopaka doesn't need to be as big and chunky. In fact, I think he works better as a slightly slimmer guy. Like a lean. I think he works better as a lean guy. Well, I would say Tahu's the bodybuilder. Kopaka's the karate guy. If just kind of as a comparison for stuff. And so if you take basically that budget of Kopaka and put into the Lord Skull Spiders, because Lord Skull Spiders, because he's also a low down creature, makes him look even less intimidating. So he's the size of like Pohatu, who's the smallest of the team, and then you still have 5 other T.O.A. At least if this Lord Skull Spiders was like noticeably bigger than at least a T.O.A. It's like something like make him twice as big.
See, yes, I agree. We should make Kopaka a slimmer build, And not just make the lower skull sliders bigger, make them significantly bigger, like say like a $50 set. Like make him like
even just $40.
like big honking legs that like he almost looks like he should be towering over the T.O.A even if he's still lower than them.
What I think, I'm kind of surprised they didn't do the lower skull sliders. Give him like one of each color of the spiders with him. Because he just had an extra mask. I'm like, it went from, you got lower skull spiders, and you can get an extra 3 skull spiders. Also, why didn't they have a skull spider battle pack with like different colored spiders?
That certainly would have made sense. A lot of sense. Almost too much sense, one would even say, given the past history of Bionicle.
Also, one thing that I said from day one when Gen 2 came out, what they should have done for marketing was give the T.O.A each other's gold masks. So you get Tao's. Well, you get Liwa's gold mask. Well, now you need Liwa. But like, if you want to get Tao's gold mask, you need Bionua. Just as a marketing thing. Like, because like, okay, get Tao. Because like with the old days, you had to get people's gold masks, you had to buy who knows how many mask sets. But with this one, it's like, oh, you just want Tao? Well, I got him and his gold mask. Don't need to buy anything else.
Yeah, but you put Gally's mask there. Oh, guess you should get Gally. But Gally doesn't have Tao's mask. She has Liwa's.
Basically. So, like, yeah, would it be dirty? Underhanded? Yes.
Absolutely.
But that's marketing for you. And I think that's... And I even brought that up when the podcast, when I was talking about with Ek about Bionicle and Ninjago, was basically do that same concept. So, I'm definitely... And the one thing that I will very much say about Gen 2 that it did very, very good was making nice sets. Now, I will admit, I like the aesthetic of Gen 1 better. However, I still really love the Gen 2 set, specifically the second year. Because the first year, they were still a little clunky, and they had very short, stout necks, and they didn't really move around. But by the second year, they had like more of a Bionicle aesthetic. They were a bit more filled out. They had a bit more custom-looking builds. And the combination with the creatures, I thought, looked... Mwah.
Well, I'll admit, of the second year, Tahu with his creature is like just absolute like archangel level of awesomeness.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I certainly like the looks of most of them. I definitely have some issues. Part of it is like their playability. I find them somewhat awkward, and like I'm not like they're cool. And like I know we weren't going to get the old building system back, and they did what they could with what they had, but I find it too.
Smooth.
Not smooth. I want to basically say like samurai over like instead of like a knighty armor. Like we've got a different. I don't know. I wasn't sold on the style.
See, and I was a little definitely hesitant when they first came out, but I really do like the sets. My favorite set is Umarak the Hunter. That guy there is such a solid, beautiful, cankled, loving, antlered wearing, bow hunting villain. Not only does he look good, his color's good, he's very much my favorite side. He's got an extra weapon, like, that's just stuck to his side. And even in the show, like, he's actually seen to be a very competent villain. Which I'm like, attaboy, donkey.
He is definitely probably the best build that came out of it, especially since you're not like comparing him to anything in the past. However, I will say, and this is definitely a point of bother, is the Hero Factory building system just doesn't work well with larger builds. And that's something that bothers me, and it definitely did not transition well into the Gen 2 format.
It doesn't work with larger builds for most of the time.
It can work.
The one case where I say it worked beautiful was General Grievous. That's how you make a Gen 2 build, but he's also mostly robotic. Like, the marriage between CCBS and Technic is how you make a large build look good. It's like actually marry those two systems together. You know?
Yes.
When males.
But like the Gen 2 building system, I think we could agree was not designed for larger models. And if it was, it usually just meant literally making the limb pieces longer.
It definitely was designed for it, I think, but it wasn't. I don't know. I think they did design it to basically have a lot more freedom, and I've seen people use it well. But I think the problem is, despite it being designed for it, I just think it was less intuitive than. I mean, let's be honest. It's about just as intuitive making a large build as like 2001 is. Like, 'cause you look at the Kata. Can you tell me the T.O.A Kata, which basically is just using Bionicle parts, is any better than like I don't know the Black Phantom?
Black Phantom is definitely a better of the two, but Black Phantom isn't massive. But we also established that what makes a Titan work is often a good blend of Technic.
Exactly.
And that was seriously lacking. And I just find Technic doesn't mesh with Gen 2 designs nearly as well as it did Gen 1.
I disagree with
Gen
that.
1 was-
I disagree because, like I said, I own all the Gen 2 sets. And, I mean, they only had, like, really one true Titan. Let's be honest. Like, you have Kulta, the Skull Grinder, who's, like, a bit bigger, but he's not a Titan. His set's a Titan set because of him and Akimu, but he's not a Titan. And then you have, like, a Nuwa, sure, he's a $25 set, but those weren't Titans. But, like, Umarak the Destroyer was a Titan, and despite that set having its own flaws, it is a good build. I think it's actually, like, shows very much how you make CCBS into a Titan form.
I didn't find it that great a build. The hand function was fun, but I did not see it as a good build.
I mean, I like how it looks aesthetically, like, as a character, but I think the build is solid. But, again, I haven't dug out those stuff in a long time. I think definitely where Gen 2 sets thrived, like, what's some of the best, though, with the small sets. Those, at least with the Protectors. The Protectors, I love their masks, and I just love the builds. They're just adorable. They're, arguably my favorite sets.
The Gen 2 style definitely works in favor of smaller builds, like getting posable and somewhat filled out. Like, it actually surprisingly fills out on a little build. It's just the larger it gets, I find it requires more cleverness.
My biggest issue with the CCBS building style comes down to body length to leg length. Because the standard Hero Factory body that they made for the second year of Hero Factory worked great for the heroes, but anytime you're trying to make something bigger than that, the legs look so long. And, like, Tao specifically has that problem because he's got, like, extra friction sockets in his feet and his hips, plus having, like, longer leg pieces that he just has, like, these really unproportionately long legs, which just looks bad.
Which is ironic because I found the second wave of Gen 2 that T.O.A had, like, seemed, especially Liwa, had legs that were too short. Though with the CCBS style, I'm like, yeah, they definitely shot themselves in the foot when they made a standard torso that wasn't really extendable.
I mean, they did kind of change that up in this,
but they didn't make, like, shoulders and hips two different.
Yeah, like
pieces.
I mean, they had different lengths of torsos, but only, like, I think
very
two.
minimally.
So it's like you're too long or too short. Like, that was definitely a problem, very much so. But one thing I also don't like about the sets was I don't like the Hero Factory foot. I never liked it.
It's good if you want to make boots.
It worked great for the Star Wars figures, like beautifully for Star Wars figures. That foot works, but for, like, the Bionicle, like, they should have made their own foot for the T.O.A's design. I think, like, come out with a new foot piece. Like, the Protector's got a new foot, and, like, I think they're the only one who got a new foot. But, like, they should have just had a new foot piece for the Bionicles. But and then, like, the mask, I also do think are a little too small. But Gen 2, I think, like, if you actually, like, figure out all the lore and stuff, like, there's a lot more, I think, to it that, like, expand mostly from, like, you know, the books and comics, which, similar to most any, like, franchise, if you read books and comics and any expanded stuff, things get better. Like, that's half the reason why I think Star Wars is expansive, because, like, it was all that extra media. I would just say that the worst part of Gen 2, or the main, like, the Netflix show and kind of the online animations were the worst parts. Just, I mean, the short animations for each character I think were fine. I don't think they were horrible by any means. But compared to what we had Bonk with Gen 1's, like, animation or, like, commercials, they don't stack up.
I mean, yes, for simply a commercial, ignoring Anua's voice and the fact that they're all voiced by the same person. In fact, the fact that I think there even is a voice, they worked, you know, small, simple, new style, but yeah, there's just a charm and gloriousness to, like, the online Flash animations. I want a whole series of just Flash animation. I could watch that all day. No voices, just that sound effect in the background. But, like, yeah, the media just really did not stack up in any way.
Well, also, there wasn't, like, any really... Do you remember seeing any commercials for Gen 2 that were just like, that's a cool commercial?
The very first one where you see him 3D animated, but it was like that very brief little bit, kind of like just like the short commercial, just like charging, grabbing the mask, and boom. Like that animation, if they had gone with that animation for more commercials, that would have been awesome. It's like a lot of Lego commercials. You get really into it, but then it just becomes, and play with this toy.
See, I only thought that was okay. See, my favorite, I thought the best bit of the Bionicle like advertising or like promotion was that very first like short like GIF of just seeing the mask of creation spinning around in a circle on top of the podium. Like that right there for me sold Gen 2 for me. And like I will say Gen 2, the packaging for the sets, Bionicles almost never looked better. Like the packaging, like the upper logo where it says Bionicle, that stony like work with like the bluish light peering like seeping through this goldish font of Bionicle. Oh, it's beautiful. Like and like some of the concept art for Gen 2, again, beautiful. Like there was that's the thing that dismotivates me more. It's like I saw the potential in Gen 2, and I didn't mind the fact that they were like just rebooting it and changing stuff. I thought,
Oh no,
I think the problem was it came too soon.
that is possible. I will say something this though, that when they rebooted, it's a good thing that they didn't try to just retell the same story, because I think the Joker is a good example. They're bringing back a beloved character, which is weird to say about the Joker, but a beloved character, and rather than retelling
we love psychopath people.
rather than retelling the exact same story in a new animation, essentially, they were smart enough to go, okay, we're going to at least tell a different story, so when we reboot it, it's harder to be side-to-side comparison, because originals, unless the original sucked, is almost always better than a reboot.
What can we say? We're not doing the Spider-Man approach of this, of just retelling the same story. Or like, but the thing is, like, the reason why I think it came too soon was, okay, so it came out like what, 5 years after? Yeah, 5 years, 2015. So that was 5 years after Bionicle ended. So at that point, you still have people in love with the original franchise, and the story to Gen 1 only ended like 3 years prior. Like Greg was still working, I think, on the story up into 2012 or 2013, into 2012, I think, almost like 2 years after.
At least a full year after.
So you still have people basically trying to figure out more stuff about Gen 1. Like it hadn't like been put to rest yet. People were still like hurt by it. So that's one reason why the whole idea about whether or not it was connected to Gen 1 was so strong in it. But I think would have worked better if, let's say they waited 10 years, okay? Okay, so let's say 10 years after 2010, right? Most Bionicle fans at that point would be like, what, almost 30, you think? Like,
Probably.
right now, like,
25 to 30.
basically this year, right? 25 to 30s, right? At this point, even that might be too soon, because at this point, like, some Bionicle fans are going to have kids. And I think a reboot will work best when Bionicle fans have kids. Because then, you'll be looking for, okay, what toys do I get my kid? Oh, there's new Bionicle toys. Those are great. And then you get kids Bionicles. And sure, the story's different, but when it's someone else's, when it's a different generation's toy, you kind of accept changes more than than if it would happen in your own time.
Like in Star Wars. Fans who grew up with the original Star Wars don't care much for the prequels. Whereas in you and I, we grew up with the age of the prequels, so we saw them at a young age, so we quite enjoy the prequels, even though we agree that they are not as good as the originals. We enjoyed the prequels. We have no problem with them at all.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like Bionicle, I love that we got that reboot when we did, but in wholeheartedness, I feel like it should have waited a bit longer to give everybody, time to basically introduce, because at that point, the big reboot was basically just for Bionicle fans. Like, it wasn't for new fans. Lego wasn't marketing it to new fans very much. Honestly, I think and another thing that they should have done was have a video game, because all they had was an app, like an app game, like on your phone. Which I know phone games are those are popular, but if you want people to like a franchise because of a game, do not do a mobile game. Games that basically get people more interested in are like PC or like console games. Which even in Gen 1, I felt like they should have really made like a good, because they had Bionicle Heroes, but it sounded like it was kind of like similar to the very first Bionicle game, was kind of cut short, and it seems like Bionicle games always had bad luck with it. You're not getting finished, not getting completely finished, or just being convoluted.
Which is sad, because I think Bionicle as a concept, if it could get rebooted in general, well, I'd love a TV series or even just a good solid full-length, well-animated movie. A video game, like just a fully like a real solid video game, like something like on the. I'll just go Resident Evil because that's a title I know.
See, I would love to see a Bionicle game that's on a more similar level to like the Halo franchise or Mass Effect. Like something that's big, has a lot of lore of its own. Like I think Bionicle could exist as a video game franchise or a comic book franchise at this point. Like it doesn't necessarily need the toys because you that's the thing is like Bionicle, I don't know, Lego marketed Gen 2 specifically to the old fans. But the problem was, I don't. Most of the old fans had already grown out of buying Lego, so they probably weren't buying all of it. And the newer kids, they weren't going to get into it. And there was already like competition for that sort of style of storytelling with like Ninjago of like Elemental Heroes. And like I said, I think they should have waited. But I do truly believe that Gen 2 has more to offer. And then like, and one of my favorite things that Gen 2 did that I was really, really looking forward to was the Mask of Time. Like I know it was always kind of on the sidelines because I love the Mask of Time, but I do kind of feel like in Gen 1, they basically had the piece and they're like, we should really use this, in the story. And so it was hastily thrown into the Borak Call arc. Like literally, it was literally a Deus Ex Machina in that. There was no prior. It just showed up out of nowhere. Just because Lego's like, it's a promotion now. Here's a mask. And then they made it work a bit better in 2004. But at that point, it's like, well, it can speed up and slow down Tam. It's a little underwhelming because it was already constrained, I think, to it. But in Gen 2, they had like these different legendary masks. The Mask of Creation, the Mask of Control, the Mask of Ultimate Power, and the Mask of Time. Like, the idea of focusing on these masks were, I think, again, a really good idea. Like, I think Bionicle works best when you're focusing on the mask, the Kanohi. And like I said, like the design for the Mask of Control and Mask of Creation, I think, were the best looking Generation 2 masks. Like, having the runes on them is just beautiful. Like, specifically Makuta's mask, the Mask of Control, always made me think kind of like Egyptian, like headdress or like a Gould's face mask. Like, I just loved it.
It doesn't strike me as Bionicle mask, but I do love it. It's probably the best piece that came out of it.
And so it's just like I said, the thing that bothers me most with Gen 2 is that there's just so much potential for it. And it also didn't grip newer kids very well. Like I think that basically what it came down to is that it just didn't attract newer kids. You could say that's just an action figure, like construction figure line. Like Hero Factory basically at that point, even the last wave didn't have like figures. They had mechs with giant creatures, which you can very easily do with System. So I'm like, I don't know if it's just a construction thing, but yeah, no, Lego didn't market it. But I truly do believe that Gen 2 was actually pretty good. It was just marketed poorly, and I think Lego didn't expect it to. I don't think Lego really cared if it did well or not. I think they were mostly just trying to appease the fans, especially how like the attention towards Bionicle's been with Lego the last several years. Makes me definitely feel like some sort of change in Lego's management. Someone in the management doesn't like Bionicle or doesn't think it deserves recognition. I don't know if it has to do with like a certain person in charge of a certain department or what. It's like somewhere in there, someone doesn't like Bionicle.
The evidence does add up.
Or either that, or it's just someone doesn't like Bionicle fans. Don't get me wrong, we're a bit of a whiny bunch.
Like Rick and Morty. Apparently the show's great, but the fans are annoying.
There's a lot of fan bases out there, but the fans are a bit of a pain in the butt. But yeah, and overall, I think Gen 2 is good. Has some flaws. I really think the sets are some of the funnest to pose and mess around with. But that's just because, they got better. Like, I like the sets of Gen 2 probably more than, like, or at least for the standard, like, T.O.A size builds, more so than, like, the last several years of Bionic, like, Gen 1. Because, like, sure, I like the Kotorian Knights, but it was getting kind of stale. And the second year of Gen 2, when they started introducing, like, more unique arm and leg designs, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, when Voy Nui came out, or 2005 and 6, they kind of established a more permanent building system for them. And due to that, they've somewhat limited themselves in what looks cool, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot.
Oh, also, the second thing outside the potential of Gen 2, the other thing that pisses me off, just annoys me to no ends, is the incompatibility of the masks to Gen 1 heads. You might be saying, well, they have their own heads and can attach you. Why does it matter that much? because they attach by socket, while the original heads attached by balls. So when you're trying to make certain builds, sometimes it's really hard to meld the two together when you're using certain parts. And second, Gen 2 only has two colors, like
Two eyes.
three eye colors. Like, you don't have a lot. Like, with the Metro Nui, you had 6 different eyes. I'm like, I don't know, it just bothered because I don't like how the Gen 2 heads look. I hate the face of the Gen 2 heads. I miss the mouths of Gen 1.
I like the whistling.
So, yeah. No, overall, I'm kind of actually feel like our opinions on Gen 2 isn't as different as I think we originally thought.
Simply that you feel it's unappreciated, and I'm like, nah, I'm okay. It's crap.
Pretty much, you say it's trash. I think it was deep down it was down in the rough somewhere. It just never got the potential. But like I said, my mostly intrigue came from the mystery and like the possibilities that it was leading on to. But unfortunately, so much stuff was left unanswered, and we'll never know.
I wanted to know where the Gen 1 was going, so I had no investment in learning where Gen 2 was going because I knew it didn't matter.
I'm also used to reboots with like Transformers. Like I'm so used to so many variations of stuff that I didn't really care. But I think we'll probably end it here. I think we kind of at this point I could tell I'm beginning to just rehash stuff. So I think this was long overdue getting Gen 2 out of my system to kind of just talk about it. I mean, I might do other videos on Gen 2 some other day, who knows, and possibly review the sets someday. But yeah, no, this was kind of fun to do, and no, I'll be looking forward to next week's podcast. I hope someone in the comments tells me something. Comment. If you guys have any thoughts about Gen 2. I mean, I'm pretty sure most people listening to this video might not have any idea about Gen 2, at least for some of them. So, until next time, I've been Onvermel, I've been your host. This has been the T.O.A Podcast, and we're retiring from the night.